Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're going to do something a little different. We are going to strip away the wild white hair, the iconic mustache, and that whole larger-than-life legend to uncover the real, messy, and deeply human story behind the world's most famous scientist. We all know the name Einstein, right? But the actual path he took to get there? Well, it's probably not what you'd expect.
Now, what if I told you that the very man whose name is literally synonymous with the word genius today actually failed a college entrance exam? Or what if I said his parents were once deeply, genuinely terrified that he had a severe learning disability? Sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? But it's entirely true. And that massive, jarring contrast between his early struggles and his monumental legacy is exactly what we're going to explore today.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, The Myth and the Boy, uncovering the origins of a late bloomer. So, let's dive right in. We all know the absolute greatest hits of Einstein's legacy. We've got E equals mc², that famous mass-energy equivalence equation that basically completely altered our understanding of the universe. Then there's his 1921 Nobel Prize in physics, which, interestingly enough, he didn't actually win for relativity, but for the photoelectric effect. And of course, decades later in 1999, Time magazine straight up named him their person of the century. He is the towering intellectual figure of the modern era. But before we get totally lost in his triumphs, we need to completely subvert those expectations by looking at his rough beginnings in Germany. Get this. Born in Ulm in 1879, young Albert was actually so remarkably slow to learn to talk that his parents genuinely feared he had a learning disability. He just didn't communicate the way other kids did. But hidden beneath that quiet exterior was a staggering, almost unbelievable brilliance. A family tutor introduced him to Immanuel Kant's highly complex philosophy when he was just 13 years old, specifically the Critique of Pure Reason. Now that is a text that completely baffles most highly educated adults, yet Einstein understood it perfectly. By age 14, he recorded that he had completely mastered both integral and differential calculus. And the craziest part, he was totally self-taught. So, you gotta wonder, what actually sparked this hidden brilliance? Well, it wasn't a school book or some formal lecture. When Einstein was just 5 years old and stuck sick in bed, his father brought him a simple magnetic compass. Watching that needle move, driven by this completely invisible force, it sparked a lifelong fascination with electromagnetism. He realized right then and there that, in his own words, something deeply hidden had to be behind things. That single, seemingly small moment basically shaped the way he would look at the universe forever.
Moving into Section 2, a rebellious, curious mind, clashing with authority and rote learning.
Have you ever sat in a classroom just being forced to memorize endless lists of dry facts and thought to yourself, this is actively killing my creativity? Well, you are in great company. When his family moved to Italy for business, they actually left 15-year-old Einstein back in Munich at the Luitpold Gymnasium to finish his schooling. And he absolutely hated it. He was a fractious, rebellious pupil who found the school's strict authoritarian rote learning actively harmful to any real intellectual pursuit. In fact, he hated it so much that he convinced a doctor to write a note excusing him, and he just dropped out to go join his family in Italy.
I mean, think about the number 12 for a second. This number brilliantly illustrates exactly why traditional schooling just didn't work for him. By the time he was just 12 years old, Einstein was already absolutely confident that nature could be understood completely as a mathematical structure. He wasn't just sitting there doing his assigned homework. He was out there discovering his own original proof for the Pythagorean theorem in his spare time. His mind needed to visualize the unseen rules of the universe, not just mindlessly memorize dates from a chalkboard.
All right, on to Section 3, failing forward, detours, exams, and changing citizenship.
So at age 16, this totally unconventional path of his hits a massive wall. In 1895, Einstein actually failed the general part of the entrance exam for the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. Can you imagine that? The future smartest man in the world failing a college entrance test? But his saving grace was that he performed with absolute distinction in the physics and mathematics sections. The principal there saw this incredibly specialized, lopsided genius and basically advised him to go finish his secondary schooling in Switzerland before trying again. It just goes to show, standardized testing simply could not capture his unique intellect.
And you know, his academic rebellion was completely matched by his political rebellion, which resulted in this fascinatingly transient life. Born in the German Empire back in 1879, he officially renounced his German citizenship with his father's blessing in 1896, specifically just to avoid military conscription. So he became completely stateless as a teenager. Eventually he became a Swiss citizen, later reacquired German citizenship so he could direct an institute in Berlin, and ultimately had to flee to the United States ahead of World War II, absolutely horrified by Nazi persecution. He was really a man who refused to be bound by borders, just exactly like he refused to be bound by traditional physics.
That brings us to Section 4, Love, Life, and Secrets. The messy, human heart of a genius.
So when Einstein went off to finish his schooling in Aarau, he fell deeply, deeply in love with Marie Winterler, the daughter of the family he was boarding with. But later, when he finally made it into the Polytechnic school, he met Mileva Maric. Now, she was the only woman in his class of 6 students. They bonded instantly over physics, actually skipping lectures together just to read advanced textbooks, and they eventually married. But it wasn't exactly a fairy tale. Years later, right before the birth of his second son with Mileva, Einstein secretly wrote back to Marie, mourning his misguided marriage and the missed life he really felt he could have had with her.
And this romantic turbulence actually led to what is arguably the most shocking secret of his entire life. Decades later, in 1987, historians uncovered private correspondence revealing that before they were even married, Albert and Mileva had a daughter named Liesl, born in 1902. But here's the thing. When Mileva returned to Switzerland from visiting her parents, the child was just gone. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to her. Einstein's letters sort of suggest she was either given up for adoption or died tragically in infancy from scarlet fever. It's a mystery that adds this profound, really devastating emotional weight to the man we usually just associate with complex equations.
Okay, Section 5, The Miracle Year, How an Unconventional Path Led to 1905.
Because he took such a weird, rebellious path through school, Einstein actually couldn't get a university teaching job after graduation. The academic establishment simply didn't want him. So he had to take a day job as a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. And it was there, just quietly working in between evaluating patent applications, that he experienced what's known as his annus mirabilis, a Latin term meaning miracle year. In 1905, while completely outside the prestigious traditional halls of academia, he published 4 separate papers in a single year that completely revolutionized modern science. The sheer magnitude of what he pulled off while basically working in 9 to 5 is just mind-blowing. I mean, in 1905 alone, he completely overturned our understanding of the universe in 4 completely separate ways. First, he explained the photoelectric effect by proposing that light actually consists of particles, or photons. Second, he definitively proved the existence of atoms by explaining Brownian motion. Third, he introduced special relativity, fundamentally linking space and time in ways literally no one had ever imagined before. And finally, he demonstrated mass-energy equivalence, giving the world E equals mc². That childhood fascination with the unseen forces moving a compass needle had finally allowed him to visualize and completely rewrite the fundamental laws of nature.
Which leads us to our final act, Section 6, An Enduring Legacy. Relativity, quantum struggles, and the modern world.
Now, obviously he didn't just peak in 1905 and call it a day, right? A decade later in 1915, he expanded his work into the general theory of relativity, completely redefining how we understand gravity by showing that massive objects actually warp the fabric of space-time itself. 2 years after that, in 1917, he introduced the concept of stimulated emission. And why does that matter today? Because it is the core theoretical mechanism behind the lasers you find in literally everything, from grocery store scanners to modern surgical equipment. He also collaborated to lay the groundwork for Bose-Einstein statistics, really expanding the frontier of quantum mechanics.
But here is the fascinating twist. The ultimate scientific rebel eventually became sort of isolated from modern physics. He famously declared, "God does not play dice." Einstein simply could not accept the fundamental randomness that quantum theory was introducing into science at the time. He felt deep down that the universe had to have deterministic underlying rules. So he spent the latter part of his life searching endlessly for a unified field theory, stubbornly pushing back against the new generation of quantum physicists. And that stance actually rendered him increasingly isolated in his older age.
So, I want to leave you with a final thought to really chew on from this explainer. If a kid who was remarkably slow to talk, whose parents literally feared he had a learning disability, and who actively despised the strict rote memorization of traditional schooling, could grow up to literally unlock the secrets of the universe, well, what hidden potential in today's nonconformists are we completely overlooking right now? Standardized tests couldn't capture Einstein's genius. Perhaps we should all spend a little less time demanding conformity and a little more time handing out compasses to see where curiosity might lead. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the world around you.